So the Obama administration, which likes to poke fun at recalcitrant congressmen, hasn't been willing to really endure much in the way of political pain itself in order to slow things down.
There's a ceasefire now. It's over. Of course, we all know it's not over. Hello, this is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on 25 cable channels from Vermont to New York City, on the internet at thestruggle.org, our YouTube channel, Struggle Video Media. Before we start, a bulletin. Last week we presented a June talk by Mariam Al-Khawaja. We were shocked to hear that a few days ago she went to Bahrain to try to help her ailing father, who was on a hunger strike during his life term in a Bahraini prison. Before she even got out of the airport, she was grabbed and put in prison herself. Go to our website, thestruggle.org, to find out details and to figure ways you can help. This is a critical situation.
President Obama is reportedly seeking a non-binding climate accord in lieu of a binding global treaty to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The New York Times reports U.S. negotiators are crafting a proposal that would not require congressional approval and instead would seek pledges from countries to cut emissions on a voluntary basis. Earlier this year, Obama voiced his frustration with members of Congress who refused to accept the reality of climate change.
In some parts of the country, weather-related disasters like droughts and fires and storms and floods are going to get harsher, and they're going to get costlier. Today's Congress, though, is full of folks who stubbornly and automatically reject the scientific evidence about climate change. They will tell you it is a hoax or a fad. One member of Congress actually says the world is cooling.
Meanwhile, a new draft of the United Nations report warns climate change could become irreversible if greenhouse gas emissions go unchecked. The report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, obtained by media outlets, says human-driven warming has already fueled extreme heat and torrential rains as temperatures have risen 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit since pre-industrial times.
The new UN report is more of the same in a sense. It's the scientific community through the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change telling us what they've been telling us now for 2 decades, that global warming is out of control and the biggest threat that human beings have ever faced. They're using what was described as blunter or more forceful language. At this point, short of self-immolation in Times Square, there's really not much more that the scientific community could be doing to warn us. Our early warning systems have functioned. The alarm has gone off. All our satellites and sensors and supercomputers have produced the information that we need to know. The question is, will we act on it? And the answer so far is no. It's been no in Congress, that's for sure. Nothing is going to move through Congress, and there's no hope of a treaty that would get ratified by 2/3 of the Senate. That's the complication at the moment in international negotiations. We can't reach any kind of binding treaty. Everyone's known this, that the Times story about the new Obama approach is pretty much old news. Everybody's known for years that there's not going to be a treaty ratified by the U.S. Senate, and everyone's been looking for some kind of workaround. The workaround would involve some kind of different voluntary commitments by different countries, but done publicly so one could keep track of them. If this all sounds a little dubious to you, it will sound even more dubious to all the countries that are, watching themselves disappear beneath the waves, so on and so forth as global warming accelerates. The real question, though, is less the form of the agreement than the content. And here's where we'll find out in the next few months whether the Obama administration is actually serious or not. If we're going to do anything about the problem on the scale that the scientists describe it, then we're going to need far, far more ambitious attempts than the Obama administration has put forward so far. Yes, they've put a cap on coal-fired power plants. That's good. At the same time, they've helped expedite the rise of the United States to become the biggest coal and gas producer in the world, passing the Saudis and the Russians. And they've watched coal exports steadily grow. That's not compatible with what the scientists tell us, that we need to keep 75 or 80% of the fossil fuel that we know about underground. So the Obama administration, which likes to poke fun at recalcitrant congressmen, hasn't been willing to really endure much in the way of political pain itself in order to slow things down. The rest of the world can see that. The only way we'll change any of these equations here or elsewhere is by building a big movement. That's why September 21st in New York, which all these groups are coordinating, is such an important day.
Well, Bill, given the failure of the United States Congress in any way to act, what do you think President Obama could do? Some of the specifics of what a more progressive policy on climate change would be? Sure.
President Obama could have said forthrightly 4 years ago or 3 years ago, we're not going to build the Keystone Pipeline. That would have been a signal to the rest of the world, because it would have been the first time that a world leader had said, here's a massive project that we're not building because of its effect on the climate. Instead, he's just sort of delayed and passed it along from one election to the next and tried to avoid any political pain. There are many other things he could be doing, including pushing hard for a serious price on carbon, which is not necessarily a political impossibility. There's a good editorial in today's Washington Post about these so-called cap and dividend proposals that would put a big tax on carbon, but then rebate the money directly to citizens. It's the kind of thing that might strike a chord if pushed hard. But the president hasn't expended much political capital in this direction. We also should be working hard, figuring out how at every turn to expedite and speed up the deployment of renewable energy. The president made a big point of how he was expediting the federal permitting process to do things like build the southern half of the Keystone Pipeline across Texas and Oklahoma. There hasn't been the same kind of work to speed up, say, the Cape Wind project off the Massachusetts coast. We need to be doing what the Germans have done. There were days this summer when the Germans were getting 75% of their power from solar panels within their borders. That's the kind of effort that we need. We're not, I think, yet at 1% in this country.
Bill McKibben, when President Obama flew into Copenhagen, many there, the thousands of people who were there for the UN Climate Summit, felt he ultimately sort of blew up the possibility of real agreement there. Now, that was in 2009. Do you think he has made progress? Do you see this, what is being rolled out, politically binding, but not actually binding, as continuing that trend?
I think actually it's probably continuing the trend we saw at Copenhagen. They're not willing to provide the kind of powerful galvanizing leadership that might really shake things up, but they are determined to avoid another face-costing embarrassment like there was in Copenhagen. The next Copenhagen, Amy, is in Paris next December 2015. If it's the same kind of PR disaster that Copenhagen was, the president will leave with a stain on his legacy. I think he wants to try and keep some kind of climate legacy. He knows it's how history will judge him. But so far, they're not willing to take the kind of political hit in this country from the fossil fuel industry that would go hand in hand with doing something serious. So they're kind of trying to have it both ways, not for the first time on some issue in the Obama administration.
In Connecticut, a number of trade unions and the big federation, the AFL-CIO, joined together with prominent church leaders to support the People's Climate March. They had a press conference in New Haven's Union Station.
Last spring, several national organizations announced the People's Climate March for September 21st as a way to welcome world leaders including President Obama, to the UN Climate Summit and urged them to take significant action before it's too late. For the last few months, the Roundtable leadership has worked to engage Connecticut's labor organizations and religious communities in mobilizing people to travel to New York City for this historic event. We stand here today to witness some of the fruits of that organizing by featuring the voices of labor and religious leaders. Metro North and our members of Congress and Governor Malloy responded by providing active support, helping to secure the commitment from Metro North to provide discounted fares and enhanced capacity on the day of the march. And it's with great excitement that we announce the launch of ctclimatetrain.org, where you can now purchase those discounted tickets online.
You know, on behalf of the 200,000 working men and women of the state of Connecticut who are members of the Connecticut AFL-CIO, we are proud to be a part and a partner in bringing attention to this historic event in New York City. Our members and their families understand the importance of being proactive when it comes to safety and health, job security, and retirement security. And this march that we're talking about is real-world opportunity to raise awareness that good jobs and a healthy environment are pieces of the same puzzle when it comes to workers' economic freedom. Climate change is altering the way we live and the way we work. With greater temperature and precipitation extremes, more severe storms, changing weather patterns, we are encountering new challenges and more serious hazards in the workplace. Firefighters and other emergency responders are facing longer hours and more days of taxing work with fewer financial resources. In parts of the United States, milder temperatures and colder seasons are being followed by drier weather during hot seasons. Massive fires are becoming more likely. And if you can believe it, nearly 40% of the Forest Service budget was dedicated to fire-related activities, 4 times what it was just a couple decades ago. Climate change means bigger, hotter, more expensive, and more unpredictable fires. In June of 2013, the nation was rocked when 19 firefighters died near Prescott, Arizona, as a result of a raging blaze. And as outdoor conditions tilt towards unhealthy extremes due to climate change, the poor states of our schools will also be amplified and aggravated, putting a strain on our children's ability to learn and our teachers' ability to teach.
In Bridgeport, Connecticut, a number of groups ranging from the Connecticut Coalition for Environmental Justice, the Sierra Club promoting enduring peace, and the Bridgeport Education Association are banding together for a climate rally on September 13th to encourage folks to go down to New York City, but also to target the big coal-burning plant inside of Bridgeport. Here's a 1-minute promo.
Bridgeport houses the biggest greenhouse gas producer in the state, the Bridgeport Harbor Station coal-to-electricity plant. The plant has long been a danger to the community with all the chemical wastes it shoots into the air. It's located among the homes of low-income and mostly minority residents of Bridgeport. On Saturday, the 13th of September, there will be a rally at Baldwin Plaza with music and food. It's called Bridgeport Act on Climate. Its goals are to close down Bridgeport's dirty energy plants, to get people to the giant climate rally in New York on September 21st, and to show how war is ruining the climate. DJ entertainment by Kingsley and rapper Jay Stax, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturday the 13th. Attend the rally and fight for your future.
If you watch national news, the Gaza war has disappeared. There's a ceasefire now. It's over. Of course, we all know it's not over. Not for the thousands whose loved ones have been killed, nor for the thousands who have suffered injuries, including the hundreds of children paralyzed for life. or for the people who have witnessed unspeakable horrors to family and friends. Just to name one little girl, Maha al-Sheikh Khalil. The name may be unfamiliar, but most likely her image is not. She had a concussion and fractured nose, so that her bruises made it look like she had great big panda eyes. Unfortunately, that's the least of her troubles. Shrapnel wounds to her spine left her paralyzed, probably permanently. And her family is decimated. She lost her mother and 4 of her sisters. It's also not over in the sense that the mad project of expelling Palestinians and constructing apartheid in Palestine, Israel, has not been altered. The fishermen are able to sail out a few more miles from the Gaza coast, but the people in Gaza are still walled in, and the fruits of their labor may not be exported. The walls and checkpoints are all over the West Bank, and the occupiers are still stealing more land and demolishing more and more Palestinian homes. So we say, and I ask you to repeat, end the occupation and siege.
End the occupation and siege.
Let Palestinians live.
Let Palestinians live.
Punish those guilty of crimes against humanity.
Punish those guilty of crimes against humanity.
Not another nickel for Israel's crimes.
If you ever ask yourself why Israel conducts wars in the last 14 years at least, in Lebanon, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip, every 2 or 3 years, let me give you the answer. Well, it is because of racism. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu once said, in response to failed peace negotiations, that the Middle East is not Scandinavia. More recently, Yair Lapid, the cabinet minister, described the Middle East as a rough neighborhood. A former Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, from the so-called Labour Party, made a similar remark describing Israel as a villa in the jungle. They all have the same bottom line. Israel is a white oasis surrounded by savages that are not familiar with civilized gestures of peace negotiations and compromises. The only language that they understand is the language of military might and violence. The dehumanizations of Israel enemies had a heavy toll in human lives. Nearly 5,000 were killed on both sides in the Second Intifada, 270 in Operation Defensive Shield in 2002, 409 in Operation Summer Rains in 2006, more than 1,000 at the same year in the Second Lebanon War, 1,500 in the Gaza War of 2008 and 2009, and 2,200 in the last months or so, the last 2 months in the war in Gaza that took place just now. The racist premises of a white oasis is shared by American policymakers who spend billions of dollars each year to arm the Israeli military. As taxpayers, as people who care about the terrible death toll and the terrible ongoing war, and as people who seek peace for both Jews and Arabs, Israeli and Palestinians, we must all say, stop the ongoing war, prevent the next military operation in Gaza, and stop the military aid to Israel. Thank you.
And I want to talk about the case of Professor Stephen Salaita. Some of you may know that Stephen Salaita is a scholar of American Indian history. He was offered a tenured position at the University of Illinois. So he quit his job at Virginia, sold his house, but there was a problem. Salaita is a Palestinian American. And like a number of brave Palestinian American academics like Edward Said, Joseph Massad, and Rashid Khalidi, he refused to keep his head down, and he has furiously defended his people. Certainly the University of Illinois knew this when he was hired. After all, he had written a book called Israel's Dead Soul. Yet over the summer, as Israel slaughtered thousands in Gaza, Salaida used the Twitter to issue a series of passionate, furious messages to try to awaken the conscience of the world. And that was too much for the powers that be in Illinois. The chancellor of the University of Illinois, one Phyllis Wise, told him she would use a technicality and not hire him. After a storm of protest, Weil explained. She wrote, "What we cannot and will not tolerate at the University of Illinois are personal and disrespectful words or actions that demean and abuse other viewpoints themselves or those who express them. We have a particular duty to our students to ensure that they live in a community of scholarship that challenges their assumptions about the world, but that also respects their rights as individuals." Let's look closely at that statement. She says it's wrong to demean and abuse viewpoints, period. So it's wrong to demean Mein Kampf, or the racist movie Birth of a Nation, or the speeches of those who opposed giving relief to starving Irish during the potato famine. She says it's wrong to abuse the people who deliver a certain viewpoint. But is it really wrong to demean certain persons, like the Saudi clerics who think all Christian churches should be destroyed? Or the ISIS commander whose opinion is that all who don't accept his viewpoint need to be put to the sword? Or the viewpoint this year of an Israeli professor who said publicly that Israel could deter attacks by giving notice that such attacks would be met by the rape of the relatives of the guilty party? Would a professor be uncivil and out of bounds to demean and abuse such despicable people? Let's talk about a couple of Salaida's tweets that have been singled out. Supposedly, in one of the tweets that was outrageous, he used the F-bomb. It read, "F Israel." Is that an example of ethnic hatred? Well, but the complete tweet also said, "And while I'm at it, F2 Palestine Authority, Sisi, Arab monarchs, Obama, UK, EU, Canada, US Senate, corporate media, and ISIS." Here's another of his tweets. At this point, if Netanyahu appeared on TV with a necklace made from the teeth of Palestinian children, would anyone be surprised? Did that cross the line? Well, I want to read what a man who wrote in a pre-Twitter age said about another man whose viewpoint and actions he despised. In his fictional soliloquy, the writer has the King of Belgium supposedly complaining about a person who proposes to construct a memorial for the perpetuation of my name out of my 15 million skulls and skeletons, and is full of vindictive enthusiasm over his strange project. He has it all ciphered out and drawn to scale. Out of the skulls, he'll build a combined monument and mausoleum to me, which shall exactly duplicate the Great Pyramid of Cheops. He desires to stuff me and stand me up in the sky on that apex, robed and crowned with my pirate flag in one hand and butcher knife and pendant handcuffs in the other. Pretty nasty stuff. You could read it as a call to murder the king and stuff him. Who could have written such uncivil words? Anybody know? It was our Mark Twain, the beloved humorist, who was also a fierce moralist, who was angry that the King of Belgium, King Leopold, presided over an enterprise that had killed millions. Now, Chancellor Wise of Illinois somehow claims her ridiculous call for not demeaning any idea or any person is necessary to respect students' rights as individuals. Yet Salaita has never been accused of demeaning a student, no matter his or her point of view. What he's been doing is demeaning the reputations of people who send bombs into mosques and hospitals and ambulances and into UN schools. People who go ahead with their attacks, even if it means blowing up whole apartment buildings and whole families. People who will use any kind of lie to defend their killings, to scream that the victims are using human shields when it is Israeli soldiers who actually have a long history of taking kidnapped Palestinians and forcing them to walk in front of them on raids. Those people should be demeaned, reviled, excoriated, condemned, humiliated, disgraced, and ultimately put on trial. Do you agree? Yes. So we salute you, Stephen Salaita, and others in academia like Yale's Chaplain Shipman, who took personal risks to expose the inexcusable. Thank you. If you're in Bridgeport on the 13th, be sure to visit The Struggle's Canopied booth. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller, and this is The Struggle.